Hello everyone and welcome back to Skin. It's been a while since we've seen each other. It was a summer full of events, some dates, some work trips around the world. So unfortunately, I haven't had much time to make videos. But now, with the winter season, I should be able to get back to making videos fairly regularly. At least we'll certainly try. And in today's video, I genuinely want to show you precisely how to effectively approach, how to skillfully work with, and how to successfully start modifying the various presets you can readily buy in many stores, like for instance, Marco Fantondo's renowned store where I personally sell my own, but truly from virtually anywhere else. Because in actual reality, a preset should fundamentally be an initial starting point, a creative inspiration from which you can then meticulously modify the various sounds you discover to perfectly suit your own unique and personal liking. Actually, presets also offer, not just in my specific case, the various scenes, the 8 distinct scenes that might be found inside the presets, but if we go into the powerful stomp mode within a single scene, I can create other unique sounds that I can then save in other presets, for example. Personally, in a scene, I always try to have the essential pedals already preset so they can be readily used within the very same scene, and I'll show you precisely what I mean in just a moment. As I was saying, this summer there have been various interesting events, opportunities to go play around here in northern Italy with groups of friends, gigs at Timoda and so on. And then there have been some interesting contacts with professional guitarists who are on tour, with whom some collaborations are starting. And I'll tell you more about these later if possible, but it's really a lot of fun and it could give us ideas for making more videos and showing you how to work on sounds in professional settings. All right, let's move on and take a look right away at what it means to work with some presets that you purchase. So, what to check when you buy a preset and how you can modify it to your liking. Let's jump straight into Cortex Control. Here we are. So, as you can see, this is one of the latest presets I released on Marco Fanto's website. I'll leave the link below, or rather the link to the video that will then take you to the website if you want. It's a 1990s rock preset, inspired by the glam rock bands of those years like Whitesnake, King, Mr. Big, and so on. I used to listen to that kind of music a lot, so I drew some inspiration from it. And when you buy a preset, there are a few things to keep in mind. This applies to any producer, brand, or maker of presets, and there are many out there. So first of all, try to listen to the sound within the mix. Personally, when I make presets, I always try to let people hear some snippets without the backing tracks so that you can already get a sense of what kind of sound is really there. The sound of a preset is usually designed to sit within the mix of a track. So I've heard some presets that are really heavy on the low end and so on, but actually when you play them on their own or when you go to record a track and you're in the mix, they end up being cut either by the sound engineer on stage, the sound engineer outside, or the studio engineer. So in reality, loading up presets with too much low end might be enjoyable when I'm playing alone without backing tracks or maybe just jamming for fun. But as soon as I actually go to record something, or even if it's not professional, just for personal taste, I risk running into problems. So this is an important thing. Try to listen to the sound recorded on its own, which is something I personally do, and also listen to it in the mix, so you already have an idea. Another thing is to assess and also see a bit what guitar you're playing with. For example, right now I have this guitar here, which is actually an assembly I put together because I had a spare neck from a Fender custom shop I owned, and I had a spare bridge. I bought a beautiful relic body from Franchin Guitars, which is a company here in Vicenza, a very talented guy from Vicenza. They make all kinds of relic bodies, so maybe go check out their website. I'll leave it here in the comments. So I basically built myself another Strat with single coils because honestly, I only had that one single coil in the Diege style. So two Fat 50S and a DiMarzio, if I remember correctly, it's called DS1, something like that. Okay, so why am I using this guitar? because the specific preset in question was actually meticulously created and played with the iconic Ibanez guitar, which inherently features two powerful humbuckers and a distinct middle pickup. So quite obviously, they possess completely different sonic characteristics and tonal qualities compared to a single coil pickup. All right, so let's take a look at how the preset turned out. Let's say after I bought it, one of the first things to do, in my opinion, is always based on your type of guitar to check the settings of your input signal. I consistently maintain the input level at approximately 5.4 or 5.5, primarily because I possess certain guitars that are specifically designed to be pushed a bit more at the input stage, allowing for a richer and more dynamic sound. You see, this particular input setting, for instance, remarkably goes all the way down to a very low -15 decibels, which is quite a significant range, but in actual practice, I have found that I could potentially push it even further beyond that point, exploring its full dynamic capabilities and sonic potential. One thing to remember is that this is the I/O setting, which means that the input in this case is the analog signal from my guitar being converted into digital. So I obviously shouldn't allow it to clip at this particular point. I could potentially turn it up significantly, perhaps like this, but that specific adjustment would undoubtedly be far too much. Okay. Basically, I need to go partially into the red, utilizing the most powerful pickup I currently possess, or with careful palm muting, I should endeavor to hit the red. This is primarily because the audio sound that comes in here is essentially converted from its analog form to a digital format without any clipping whatsoever, so without damaging the integrity of the signal, but it effectively gets the precise and correct signal level to then be accurately converted to digital and subsequently thoroughly analyzed by the entire comprehensive effects chain. So in this case, if this were my main guitar, or rather if it was always and only this one, I should keep this input set to, let's say, 9 to be optimal, let's say with a bit more headroom. Now I'm going back to my standard setting because, after all, this parameter also matters. Yes, in the sense that an input is always something, a signal that optimizes, so it also optimizes the noise in this case, right? Since it's also an analog and digital converter, it also optimizes the noise floor and everything that comes after. But since I have several guitars, I realize that if I have a more powerful guitar, I can't just change the input level, let's say, of the I/O setting every time. So I keep my 5.40 like before, which I know works well for all my guitars, and here 5.4, which can work well for all my guitars. As you can see, in this case, the red really only comes up very, very rarely. Okay, with that done, let me remind you of something else. The input you have as the first block in a preset interacts with the entire preset. So we have converted with the input from the analog I/O setting to digital. Now we're in digital. This is a digital signal input that I can increase or decrease, not to make it clip, but to give more or less signal to my amplifiers. So now we are truly talking about an exceptionally clean and pristine sound, but I genuinely want to give it much more emphasis, a greater sense of presence, and significantly more compression to really make it stand out. Obviously, in this case, the volume also increases, so I then go and reduce it. This is a very noisy guitar. Listen to how much noise comes through, and you can hear it start to hiss, so you shouldn't overdo it. Personally, I use this input a lot, and when I do, I actually use it turned down to lower the level. When I want to get an extra clean amplifier sound, and this amp, even at low gain levels, still has a bit of crunch, it starts to break up a little. By carefully turning down that input gain, which is the very first signal you actually see, you can effectively clean it up and make it even much cleaner, okay? These are indeed the absolutely crucial first steps to thoughtfully take when you initially load a new preset, because the input settings themselves also significantly affect the overall sound quality you ultimately get afterwards. Especially with crunch sounds, if I use a guitar with low output and play a crunch, or a guitar with a hot pickup and play the crunch from this preset, one will sound louder than the other. So with these input gain controls, I can slightly increase the signal going into the amplifier, which means I can get a more pronounced crunch. All right, I hope I was clear. I want to remind you that if you personally disable it, as I usually do, you can clearly see the noise reduction feature is indeed off, because this particular preset is a pretty heavy one in terms of its overall processing demands. So consequently, it effectively disables the noise reduction at the very start of the processing chain, especially since the CPU is quite heavily loaded at that moment. I add it later on crunch or distorted sounds, then I insert the noise reduction block so I can manage it better. But even if you turn off this channel, or the noise reduction is disabled, or you actually turn it off with the button, the input gain knob, even if you see it maybe in a darker color, so it's in a secondary state, still affects your signal. So if you turn it down or up, it will change and influence your signal. All right, so allow me to thoroughly show you a bit of what's contained within this setup. Basically, there's an exceptionally pristine and crystal clear clean sound, okay, which is beautifully complemented by a richly textured and expansive reverberated delay, along with a truly effective and robust compressor. I specifically utilized this particular configuration to powerfully play a classic Whitesnake song, didn't I? Obviously, this particular sound is quite different from the one I previously had in the recording, because this specific guitar is much less powerful, but you can still very clearly hear the significant difference, even with a clean sound, of course, coming directly from the pickups. All right, let's see how this clean sound is made, just to give you an idea, a starting point. As I mentioned earlier, when you buy a preset, it's just a starting point to then work on other sounds and eventually create your own sounds, right? So the first block in this case is a nice compressor, the Givo. I also used it a lot on Asado's presets. I tend to use this type of compressor. It's pretty straightforward because we have 1,000 parameters, ratio, input threshold, how much you compress, the sustain, right? Here there's a compression knob, then the EQ knob, which lets you decide whether to color the sound or not, and also a high cut, which you already have here, and the mix knob that tells you how much of this effect you want to let through on your guitar signal. You could set it to 100% or 90%, 50%. In this case, we're at 72, so you can hear the compression, but it also lets the dry sound, let's call it that, of the guitar come through. Let's take a look at the amplifier. In this case, I used a Friedman 100 clean with these settings, but the trick, let's say, to get that classic extra clean sound from those years, the 80s, 90s, is exactly this, the utility transparent blend. Basically, you see there's this little dot here, right? Okay, so my signal here goes into the compressor, then into the head on row 1, continues, and is brought down. So imagine that from here, it's a single cable running and then going to these outputs 3 through 4, which are rows 3 through 4. So from row 1, it goes to row 2, and as you can see, it gets processed by the cabinet with the microphone placement, which is one of the most important elements in your signal chain. That is the cabinet and the positioning and choice of microphone type. This is something you need to work on, try out, change, modify. Maybe you put yourself between cabinets, line them up, turn them on and off to hear the difference in sound. This is very important in the creative process. When you do this, try setting up 2 or 3 different cabinets in a row, turn them on one at a time, and change the various microphones, their placement, and the type of microphone. By doing this, you can get an idea of the different signals, let's say, the different qualities of each cabinet, and the different types of EQ, and that's already a very important step. Let's get back to the topic of the extra clean. So this signal goes through the cabinet and is then processed by a chorus. There's an EQ to give it a bit of brightness on top. And there's a first reverb, which is, let's say, a classic environment. A short one to give that classic, as they say, roomy feel. Basically, to make it sound like you have an amplifier in a room. So a short reverb that gives it a bit of body. After that, we then proceed to go both to row 3 and row 4, so in a parallel fashion. Here right now, I'm basically not using any of this in this particular scene. I'm not utilizing any additional effects whatsoever. But on row 4, I most certainly am, and I'm employing a circular delay once again, but I'm only using it with precisely 2 repeats. So you absolutely won't hear it spinning around. You'll distinctly hear right, then left, creating a clear ping pong effect, and also a modulator reverb, which is truly quite nice. So then these 2 distinct signals, these 2 separate rows, one basically, which is processed in that specific manner from row 1 and row 2, goes straight out in full stereo, always in stereo, and the one originating from row 4 is processed and also goes out in full stereo. Therefore, the signal that has been processed by both row 3 and row 4 then ultimately comes out in stereo. So it sounds extra clean, absolutely perfect. This is basically also thanks to, as we mentioned earlier, this transparent blend. What does it do? It takes, as you can see, there's this white dot along with this one. I told it, dear transparent blend block, take the source signal from where? Friedman 100, so that means it takes the audio, the signal coming out of this amp head, and brings it here. So this signal continues and passes through the cabinet. This signal that arrives here and will then be sent forward like the other one is basically taken before the cabinet. This is what gives me this really important crystalline quality, because I don't have the cabinet's filter. So here on the blend, I'm telling it to mix 50% of the sound coming from the cabinet and 50% taken directly from the amp head. Let me show you. If I were to now completely deactivate and turn off the blend function, you would immediately notice a profound and significant alteration in the auditory experience. Listen very closely and you will perceive that absolutely everything within the soundscape undergoes a dramatic and noticeable transformation, shifting from its current state to something entirely different and distinct. This is the classic sound of a microphone in front of the cabinet. The blend effectively mixes them all together. If I carefully turn it up even more, blending it completely all the way, then only the specific signal coming from this particular point here to this other point here will ultimately pass through, and that is absolutely all. So this is kind of like a mixer, right? At 0, you hear the entire signal coming in here, and this doesn't work. At half mix, it's the signal coming from here and the one coming from here, from this dot that's connected here, and at 100%, only this signal that I told it to from here will pass through. So this signal is pure as if you were plugging into a mixer with the DI directly from the amp head. Maybe even too much, right? So this is a very interesting way to use this type of effect. Let's move on to channel 2. A crunch, if I remember correctly. So here in front, I've turned everything off, you see? There's no compressor, no distortion pedals turned off. There's just a head or a cab. The head is the Friedman 100 RIT, so a crunch. The same cab with a slight microphone variation, but I don't think this mic change actually had much effect. An EQ and reverb, let's say, to give that amp in the room feel. Listen without reverb. And it changes, right? Then, as I was saying before, here you can see there are various effects, right? But they're turned off. Like if I go here, you see there's a tube screamer. Here, there's Pamela Ray, which I really like. All of them have this little dot. So it means they can be activated in independent scenes. And as you can see here too, if I activate it, for example. And here I tell it, as you remember, right? To modify a parameter and link it to a single scene without changing it everywhere, right click. In this case, it's not assigned. Well, I can do it. I remove it. Now I right click, assign to scene, and then it's assigned to this scene. The moment I make a change here, it won't be changed in the other scene. You see here, it's 1.6 and here it's 3.5. If I pull it down here, I set it back to 1.6 and that's fine. This is to say here, if I click on the block, right click and you see assign to foot switch. So I tell it, I want to activate this particular effect by simply pressing foot switch A, or perhaps B, or even C, okay? The very moment I make this specific assignment and then proceed to go into stomp mode, I can effortlessly recall and then either activate or deactivate my various effects automatically. In fact, I can even assign this one, which is our incredibly useful adaptive decay that I personally use as a very effective noise reduction. I'll assign this one too, as you saw, to pedal A. So now I'm in crunch mode. This one is off and this one is off. When it's off and I've set it to activate when I press A, and I've done the same for this block, basically I'm activating two effects at the same time. So now by simply pressing my distortion pedal, you can clearly see I turn it off and on, but at the very same time it also simultaneously activates the powerful super saw of the mood, creating a truly dynamic effect. You see, it's a very light and subtle crunch, providing just a hint of grit to the sound. If I desire a more pronounced and aggressive distortion, I simply press the A button, which activates a pre-selected and carefully configured additional distortion pedal. Alternatively, I had already taken the proactive step of selecting another distinct distortion pedal from my extensive collection, ensuring a wide range of tonal possibilities. So, to demonstrate the versatility, let's meticulously turn off the A pedal, then proceed to activate the legendary Tube Screamer pedal, known for its iconic mid-boost and smooth overdrive characteristics. Or for an even more complex and layered sonic texture, we can engage both pedals together, blending their unique characteristics to create a truly powerful and dynamic sound. So in a preset that you go to create, you can do all of this here. Mine are already set up, so when you're in a scene, you can go into stomp mode and start trying to activate what's there, what you find, so that you already have some additional scenes ready. So now I add the delay, add the distortion, and I already have, if I want, a sound for playing solos. I also always add, as the last pedal, a 3% volume boost, so I could work like this in this scene and already activate the various stomps as if I had a small stomp pedal board and work directly on a scene. And here you can even get a solo out of it. Add a chorus, keep the crunch at a low volume, and it almost becomes clean. As you can clearly observe, this particular effect, this specific preset, also inherently included a harmonizer, which is, to be more precise, a pitch effect. This pitch effect was set in a minor key, providing a distinct sonic characteristic. Furthermore, for each individual preset, and indeed for every unique scene, you had the comprehensive ability to access and modify the key settings, allowing for extensive customization, okay? I will now show you scene C, which is a little bit more aggressive, but even in this particular instance, you could certainly give it even more distortion if you so desired. These are some examples of how you can then modify your presets, okay? That's how you can modify the various presets and sounds. Very simple, I assure you. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because there are a lot of new videos coming up. You can see a lot of interesting things, at least about my work. Talk to you soon. Until next time. Bye.